go live on all the platforms before we officially start. For those on some platforms listening, welcome, and we'll be going in just a minute here. Okay, so now we're live on all platforms. So, welcome to Coach Connect. That's episode 13. Here's where we explore the stories and strategies of insights from trailblazers who are transforming the world of coaching well-being. What drives their success? What fuels their passion for helping others? We're here to uncover their secrets and share them with you. This show is brought to you by Vibely.io, the all-in-one coaching platform designed to empower coaches with tools, resources, and support they need to thrive and help their clients achieve meaningful, long-lasting growth. I'm Dr. Diego Salinas, your guide on this journey. As a neuroscientist, physician, and health coach, and co-founder of Vibely, I'm committed to celebrating the incredible work of coaches everywhere and helping them unlock their full potential. So let's dive into together into what makes coaching such a powerful force of change. The three-time cancer survivor, Gretchen Holmes, is a dynamic speaker, author, and host of the Work in Between podcast, where she and her guests take a deep dive into the struggles, joys, and daily actions that move us forward physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Diagnosed with diabetes in 2021, Gretchen transformed her life by losing over 100 pounds and continues to focus on the daily work necessary to maintain a vibrant, healthy lifestyle. Previously, Gretchen worked as a stand up comedian and continues to use humor to navigate the complexities of life. She was also a co creator, co producer, writer, and honor talent for WUMR's Let's Talk Health, and was named one of 100 successful women to know on the Gulf Coast in 2020 by Gulf Coast Women's Magazine. Her book, A Work in Between, a memoir about stepping out of my shadows, available now. Gretchen, welcome to the podcast. Honored to have you on today.
Thank you, Diego. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so I was honored to be on your podcast a while back and happy to have you here. And we often start the podcast with people's kind of backstories. I know I kind of touched on it lightly in your bio, but really kind of, Gretchen, what got you excited or what your passion to helping others and serving others in this way?
So, as it is for all of us, my story started a long time ago. I actually was raised in an alcoholic home where my dad was an active drinker and my older brother was a hemophiliac. So he was a bleeder and he was in the hospital a lot. And then my younger brother got hit by a truck while he was riding his bicycle when he was 8. So we almost lost him. And I was about the only one that didn't have anything major going on. However, you can only be so anxious and scared and uncertain before you have to make yourself feel better. And so the way I coped was eating. That was my drug of choice. And so I was an overweight child. I was an overweight adult. I became obese, morbidly obese. Along the way, I experienced cancer 3 times. And my family, I've actually buried my mom, my dad, and both brothers. And so you can't have all those experiences happen to you without starting to question some things. So when I was diagnosed in 2021 with diabetes, it really rocked my world, more so than any of the cancer diagnoses. And I was stage 4 at one point. It was the diagnosis of diabetes because I've been watching my younger brother struggle with diabetes. And he'd already lost a leg, he was already on dialysis. And we knew that he wasn't going to have a whole lot of time left. We just did. So when I was diagnosed, it made me really stop and think, man, that's my future. And I knew I was going to lose my brother, and we did 3 months later. But I thought, if you don't want that to happen, so that my husband and my grandkids and everybody doesn't have to take care of me, you need to do something. So on the way home, driving from the doctor's appointment, I had this very interesting experience. So I had this kind of tingly, warm, like vibration happen. And it occurred to me, well, 3 months ago, you were pre diabetic. Now you are diabetic. You have time.
Mm.
And I realized a lot of people didn't. And so between my driving home and having that thought, it occurred. I thought, what a gift. What an
Mm,
incredible gift. And that immediately shifted into gratitude. Because all of my times prior to wanting to lose weight or trying to lose weight, I never really wanted to, but I felt angry and I felt punished and I felt that this was something that was being put upon me. And so it's not surprising that I was never really very successful at it.
mm,
And so this time was going to have to be different because I knew I couldn't do this again because I was now diabetic and I had to turn that around. So I approached it from a different perspective, which was that of gratitude. The whole mindset shift made such a huge difference because now I was figuring out how to treat myself with respect and with self love and self compassion versus approaching it as a punishment. And one of the things I figured out as I was starting to lose weight was I better get to the core of why I self soothe with food because I can do all of the calories in, calories out, restrictive, whatever. But until I look at really why I overeat in the first place, I'm not going to really get anywhere because I may lose the weight, but I'm going to be miserable, which means
mm,
everyone around me was going to be. And so this time I thought, nope, I got to go on a journey. I got to figure some things out here because what I've done for the last 50 some years wasn't working. So the skills that I had learned is in my dysfunctional home, as I applied them to the outside world, well, they didn't work very well. And so I had to figure some things out and so I hooked up with a transformational coach and I worked with a therapist and I did a whole bunch of internal work. And my big epiphany was this, and this is why I am getting my message out, is all the barriers that I thought were coming from the outside were all coming from the inside.
mm,
And I had to address those and figure out how to get rid of everything that I was putting in my own way. And so I started that journey and I figured a whole lot of stuff out. And, I really, we all think that before picture and that after picture when people lose a lot of weight, but nobody ever talks about the work in between that gets you there, which is
mm.
where that whole title thing came from. But everybody comments on physically how I look, but I keep telling people that's nice, but the freedom came when I started letting go of all these things and learned how to love myself and give myself self-compassion and unpeel all of the stuff that wasn't me and let that go. So that's what brought me to the podcast and writing a book and talking to people and sharing my message. The good news is it truly is the power within. Don't worry about the external stuff. So that's how we met. That's I
Yeah.
think.
No, so much there, Gretchen. And taking weight loss as an example, the external versus internal, work within, right? So many people approach weight loss. It's a common thing in our culture, in our country, and it's by, well, how do we fix it? So calories in, calories out. What kind of fasting schedules do we do? What kind of macros, right? But you're really saying that's just only the weight is a symptom of something. It's not the actual thing here, right? The so treating weight loss by just only looking at the calories is almost like treating an infection by just giving Tylenol. Yeah, I might have lowered the fever for a little bit, but the infection's still raging on inside. I didn't actually take care of the problem. And so, in your perspective, when you were looking at just the solution side, the quick fix or the external problems there, it actually created a lot of internal strife and kind of anger and frustration and toughness. And it wasn't until this changed that also knew the word you said was freedom. That's a pretty big word, right? Feeling free in your body and your mind. I don't think you were under shackles for so long, and now there's freedom to break free and create your own path.
Yeah, and it really, I mean, I choose that word very carefully
Mm,
because I don't think everyone understands how shackled we are in an obese body. in a morbidly obese body because we have all the external messages coming at us, which are always, almost always negative, and they make us feel bad. We internalize those, of course, you can't help it. But it's the messages that we tell ourselves that are even worse. And when we're only looking at the symptom of weight, and that's what quite often physicians look at, right? You get on the scale and they go, "Oh, you gotta lose weight." Well, yeah, okay, we do, but it's not quite that simple. And so it becomes this really toxic cycle where we know we're supposed to lose weight. And I have said it many times, and I wrote it in my book. I knew I was fat when I walked in the door, right? That's not news to me. I knew that. What I didn't know how to do is how to lose the weight really in a healthy way that addressed the emotional aspect of it, the spiritual aspect of it, the mental aspect of it, because the physical part is not that hard, but it's all the other stuff that gets in the way. And so when I've been preoccupied and anxious about food since I can remember. And I was always worried about whether there was going to be enough food. And it's not that we were poor or there wasn't ever enough food. The problem was that was my drug of choice. That was
Mm,
my fix. And I don't think it's any different than somebody else who has a different drug of choice where they're always worried that there may not be enough or they're going to get cut off somehow. And so ever since I can remember, I was anxious about food. That I hated going to spend the night at a girlfriend's house because I thought, oh my God, what if I can't eat
mm,
when I need to eat? And what if they don't serve enough food or whatever it was. But I took that all the way through adulthood. And it wasn't until I started eating very clean that because I'm also addicted to sugar, by the way, because who isn't? And where my brain finally told the rest of my stomach told my brain, you are full. I didn't realize how much my thoughts about food, and they call it food noise now, really preoccupied my brain. I had no idea.
mm.
And I remember I was having dinner. It was about 2 weeks after I'd started eating healthfully. And all of a sudden I stopped and I put my fork down and I thought, what is going on? I'm full. First
Mm,
time. I was 58, 59 years old. The first time my body ever told my brain, you're full. And the anxiety went away. That's
mm,
what I mean by freedom. I mean, that's life changing. And that's
yeah.
never changed. So freedom from those incessant thoughts, because you get in this cycle where you try to lose weight and then you don't, and then you beat yourself up, and then you eat more because, well, you failed again. You have no
Mm,
willpower, which I hate that word. But so when I was able to stop the food noise and the anxiety around it, I had a whole lot more energy left to do whatever I wanted to do.
mm.
And that has been life changing. So yeah, it's nice to be able to shop in nice, fun, cute stores. But what is even more beneficial is the freedom that comes with getting rid of something that you are focused on 24/7 and driving every movement you make. It's awful. And I don't think people understand how overwhelming that is, because it is.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack. One is you mentioned the start of the episode, the food was your eating was your drug of choice. And in the way you describe it, right? If you look at addictions or misuse, it's usually, there's an inability to stop when you want to stop, right? It takes up more time than you want in your mental energy, like kind of thinking about it, right? And there's often behaviors that are adapted just to get more of that, right? So, maybe going over to see friends less often because what there's food scarcity there, right? So really, if you look at it, it really hits a lot of those things that any kind of addiction will hit. And what a one that where you're we talked before that when you're dealing with food as an addiction, I imagine it's even harder than, let's say, cigarettes is an addiction, because you don't have to smoke to stay alive. You do have to eat to stay alive. You don't have to drink alcohol to stay alive. You do have to. So dealing with something that is such a part of your daily living, or be able to to be a human being, and how to re-equilibrate that relationship, because the other ones, it could be all or none, right? I'm never going to drink again. This is, you can't say I'm never going to eat again. That's a
Right.
more difficult thing to rebalance.
It is. And, we're surrounded by food. Everything. I mean, food is our love language, right?
Hmm.
It's our love language to ourselves. It's our love language to our loved ones, to our friends at work. It's everywhere, let
We
alone all
celebrate feast, right? When we have a party,
celebrate.
bring more food around. That's how we celebrate, more food.
Yeah, and if you feel bad, you eat food. And if you're bored, you eat food. And so, there's food everywhere. And so I was sitting there thinking the other day, I thought, what if I just ate food that I didn't like? Maybe I wouldn't eat so much of it because I still struggle. I mean, I have my moments where I get overwhelmed, but I thought, well, what food don't you like? There
Mm.
isn't any. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm a foodie. I like everything.
Yeah.
So, I can overeat fruit. I can overeat salad. I can over I can overeat anything. And
Mm.
so I have to be very conscious, very intentional. And the biggest thing is I try not to make it interfere with my life. I have to build a life where I can navigate the boundaries that I've had to put for myself, which often means making other people maybe go out of their way sometimes or inconvenience them, which nobody likes to do. But if people want to go to a restaurant and I look at the menu and I'm like, there is not anything there I'm comfortable eating, then I've had to learn how to say, you know, this restaurant's not going to work for me. I understand why you want to go, and please do. But if I'm going, then we've got to find something else. And that's a really hard thing to do when you've been used to accommodating everybody all the time, which comes with, low self-esteem, low self-worth, all that stuff. So it's a journey for sure. And it's something I have to navigate every day. But I learned a lot on my journey on how to recognize what power I had,
Mm.
what I can relinquish, and what to not trip me up so badly. And it's
Yeah.
it's every day I learn some new way. That's why I do a podcast. I mean, one of the things that I don't know much about is the neuroscience behind it, which is when we talked about it, it made perfect sense. I could visualize what you were talking about and why it's so hard, because it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, and to hide those kind of some of that conversation, right? People say, "Why is change hard?" I'm like, because it literally is. It takes
Yeah.
literal energy and time. It's your neurons have to, go to the nucleus, create proteins, go to the reticulum, create a vesicle, go to the receptor. These roads take time, and what you're highlighting now too is it's not all. It's not a. You had a very pivotal moment, which I want to talk more about when you got the diagnosis of prediabetes. But it's not just that pivotal; it's the continuation afterwards, right? And so many people. You mentioned 58 years of having a certain thought process, right? That say, okay, even though you've been different for many years now, it doesn't mean some of those old thoughts won't creep back, because those old roads are so well paved. I think people will trip up thinking, oh, I still have a craving, or I still sometimes do catch myself overeating, under exercising, fill in the blank here. And I think it's important to normalize that those little trip ups will happen. But resiliency, if you look step back in general, regards to the category, to me, resiliency means falling less often and getting up more quickly. You're still going to fall more often. I rollerblade. The more I rollerblade, the more I'm going to fall by definition. The more chances to slip up. But I'll also get up more quickly and fall less often per time that I skate. Right. So it really, I think it's important people understand this is this pathway. Most people who try to lose weight do struggle and regain it. And part of being consistent in change, or getting change to happen, is consistently retrying. And that's where some of that learning you mentioned, you learn every day, makes you stronger. But it is a tough challenge to consistently try. And sometimes even me, frankly, I wish I could let go and be on autopilot and not have to worry about being healthy and all these things. It's normal if they put energy into it. And as you mentioned, we should be grateful for that knowledge and grateful opportunity to know how to change versus lamenting, oh, it takes energy. I'm like, okay, I know the equation now. And at first I used to lament the equation. Oh, it takes energy to stay stable. Damn it. All right. Celebrate it. I know the equation. Put the energy where it makes a difference. It's a lifelong journey. It's not a one and done thing.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the epiphanies I had a while back was what worked 4 years ago doesn't necessarily work now. And which is difficult because when I lost all the weight and I reached my very arbitrary goal weight, and I went, okay, I'm good. Here we go. Now, I always knew that I couldn't take it for granted or think that I had this in the bag because I knew better than that. But I thought, well, I got it down. I know what to eat. I know the serving sizes. I know what to do here. And for 2 years, I kept my weight within 2 or 3 pounds.
Wow.
I know nobody was more surprised than me. And then I didn't. And then something shifted. What? I have no idea. And so I've had to figure out how to find the new strategies, the new things that work better, more effectively. Now I'm 62, so my body may just be going, well, you're older now. We're going to slow things down.
Mm,
I don't know. But I've had to realize that what I did to be successful for the first couple of years may not work as well now. So I gained some weight back. I did. And one of my biggest challenges is that I thought, oh, great, I wrote a book about this. I have a podcast about this. And the first instinct is to hide. The first instinct is to pull in. And I thought, well, that's not what I tell people. That's not what I write about. I write about, well, when you get tripped up, that's when you reach out. That's when you treat yourself with more grace. That's where you love yourself harder.
mm,
And I thought, boy, this is a lesson to learn because that's exactly what I've had to do. And I was very vocal about it on my last podcast of season two. I said, hey, here's the deal. I have found, 15 extra pounds or so that I really am not happy with. And so now I have to love myself harder. Now I've got to figure out what that looks like now. When I don't have that immediate concern because my A1C is normal and it's fine. That 15 pounds isn't making any difference. But for me, that is making a difference because I'm like, what am I not dealing with? Because I'm overeating. So knowledge is an awareness is well, now comes responsibility. Now we have a choice. Are we going to hold ourselves accountable? Because I think there is this idea that if I give myself grace, that means I let myself off with anything I do. I just have to go, well, it was a really bad day. Well, yeah,
mm.
yep, was a bad day, week, month, year, whatever it was. But we still have to go, what happened? What can I do better next time? And I'm constantly looking at, that didn't work very well. What do I need to do now? So it's been intentional for me to do this through loving myself more and not being embarrassed, which is my old way of handling it. So it's a, it's that's my new thing I'm having to work on.
Gretchen, you gave me a few goosebumps while you were explaining that. I think there's so much to learn there from any kind of behavior change. So starting with one point that you mentioned what worked 4 years ago may not work today, and my how I came to that realization was through my rollerblading. That's when my mind starts thinking. I was working on a technique for stability, right? Yeah, so for your ankle stability, hip stability for marathon training. And I had in my mind this YouTube video I was watching a instructor of how to do this right. He said, keep your hips stable, get quiet. And it hit me. I was like, wait, stability is not an outcome, it's a process. And I think I originally thought, okay, if I get to some X, Y, degrees, accolades, relationships, whatever it is, I get to the happily ever after, right? I've reached stability. I've reached that. And what a fallacy that is, right? Because, like, okay, you build a building, guess what? If you don't take care of it, what happens to the building? Dilapidates. Same for roads, right? And so, and what worked before, I sometimes use the example of study skills. Like, what worked for high school may not work for medical school for studying. Was it good or bad? It got me A's in high school. It's not going to give me A's in med school, right? Our body is different, our environment is different, and it can feel. And or see this all with parents too. They're like, oh, something works for my kid. Yeah, when he's 2 and he's 3, he's lived 50% longer, or she has. Of course, their brain's a lot different now, right? So it's a moving target, and it could be another one of those examples where those difficulties can cause us to avoid or withdraw. I'm very shame and guilt prone myself, and I've been there before. Like, oh, I don't want people to see. And we live in a culture that's very black and white, all or none, and this idea of having to be this role model. And people, and I think I commend you for. And I'm gonna try to do myself that as well. Like this year, I made a post on. I struggle with organization. I have ADHD. I'm very good at creating new things, lots of ideas, but some things I do struggle with. And I've had clients say, "Oh, your life be so easy. You know how the brain works." I said this before in the other episodes, but knowing how it works doesn't mean we don't have those same pitfalls, right? And that shame and guilt. I love what you said. It really hit me that when we're feeling that, it should actually be a signal that we should love ourselves harder. I think it's so easy to be like, oh, I get into that spiral, like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm such a fail, And that instead of when you notice that, so you're aware of those things, awareness is, I'm going to long-winded rant here, but awareness is tough. We know it's required to change, but it can be very difficult to see how much you are overeating, undersleeping, da da da, whatever it is. And you're like, oh my God, I've done this for this is permeating so much of the way I think. How am I gonna it can be overwhelming. That overwhelm, avoidance, withdrawal. And one of my clients sent me this picture. We were talking about this idea that when you're aware of something, it should just be an indication it should change, not that you're a bad person. And the picture was like, you know, Dan did a bad thing. He thinks he's a bad person. And instead of being Dan did a bad things, that means he should change his behavior. And so if we can use our awareness now, say, "Oh, okay, I'm aware I'm in this cycle of negative thinking. What can I do? Self love." And um, I'll try to unify this with one phrase I've thought of before about empathy and compassion. Use the word compassion a few times. A really strong word, and these words are used very commonly. And let me define how I view them. I'm curious what you think, Gretchen. So I think
Like,
empathy. Yeah. So for me, my version is like empathy is like understanding a point of view. Right? Someone fell down, scraped their knee. I can understand they're hurt or they've lost a family member. I can understand why they're sad. Compassion now is that empathy, that understanding, plus either alleviating suffering or improving condition. When you give a little 3-year-old a toy, maybe suffering, just want to make their life a little better, right? And so my slant rhyme for myself and my clients is that compassion requires action. Without action is not compassion. Sometimes people say, "Oh, having a lot of compassion for myself. I realize I'm going through a hard time." That's self-awareness. So self-awareness is different than self-compassion. Self-awareness is necessary to understand your patterns, but by itself, at least in my mind, it's gone to self-pity. Oh my God, look how hard it is for me. Look how and so the difference in self-awareness, which can lead to self-pity, and compassion is action. So I always tell myself, my clients, what's the action we took to make it self-compassion? The action could be grab a glass of water. I'm a little thirsty. Take a nap, call a friend. But it has to be more than just realizing how bad that we have it. And so now I'm adding to my vocab because you, Gretchen, the action is now it's time to love myself harder. How can I have compassion for myself the way I would for a friend or family member? That is huge.
it is, and really hard to do. Incredibly hard to do because most of us, unless, well, I expect there are people who have a very strong sense of themselves, and they probably don't struggle with the self-doubt and the self-deprecation and the constant laying on of guilt and shame and embarrassment and all that. And I can't relate to that. That's not me. I have always been prone to I screwed up. I am worthless. I go from feeling really good to I'm one time I I was emceeing a white coat ceremony for medical for medical residents, right? So we're welcoming them to the community were getting their long white coats, and I didn't have the names of a couple of the physicians, and so instead of calling them up by name, I called them up as by the group. But the other program, I knew them all really well, so I called them up by name. And there were a couple of times throughout the process that I blanked out. I couldn't think of the word, and which is unusual for me. Now, everybody came up to me after that and said this was the best ceremony we've ever had. You did brilliantly. And I beat myself up, I kid you not, for days because I misspoke or blanked out. And to the point where a friend of mine called me and said, "I'm worried about you. Are you all right?" And
Mm,
she's like, "This is not any." So I figured it out, but that's my default. So for me to have to consciously say, "All right, Gretchen, you've gained weight. There's some data for you. What are you going to do with it?"
mm,
And have to look at it more objectively than emotionally, which is difficult because it's all emotion for me,
mhm,
has really helped me step back and go, huh. And I've had to regroup quite a few times because I'm like, well, that's not working either. But I'm slowly figuring out the pieces that are working. And what I can't do is decide, well, then I've not been successful at all. Well, obviously, I haven't kept within that 2 to 3 pound range. So I know nothing,
mm,
I'm stupid, whatever. And so it's been a very conscious effort for me to be more compassionate with myself, which does, I agree with you, require action because I can very easily stay in that space of, I'm so tired of having to worry about this all the time. This is miserable. This is just terrible. I'm no fun anymore. This is hard. But I got to take it one step farther and say, all right, what do you need to change? But also, what do you need to say to yourself that will be your cheerleader
mm,
instead of somebody who tears you down? And I do ask myself, well, if a friend came to you and said, man, I'm really struggling, what would you say to them? Well, usually it's not what I say to myself. So I really am consciously trying to make those changes and I catch myself faster. And I have better scripts in my head to help myself. And sometimes I have to say it out loud,
mm.
literally, stop it, just stop.
Yeah.
And that will often get my own attention, but it's an ongoing battle. Of course it is, but
Yeah.
I'm doing better.
Like it's a resiliency. So you catch yourself faster. It's not that they don't happen anymore, right? I think
No,
people see people with change, they think, oh my God, they've never tripped again. It's like, no, it just now your knowledge allows you to more quickly make that U-turn,
that's
right?
right.
And acceptance is a kind of a word I hear a lot in my work too. And I think people sometimes socially think where acceptance means I renounce to it and I hands up in the air. I accept it and like, well, that's just the way it is.
That's
I accept gravity is 9.81 meters per second. I accept it. No, no. I say acceptance and behavior change is just like you mentioned, data points. It's your starting point on your GPS. If you go your phone, I'm trying to go, I don't know, to the Grand Canyons. Am I coming from Miami or from California? It's just gonna, I'm gonna get the same place. I have to accept my starting point. And that's been my version of that. So I say, because you're right, our emotional brains do judge. I was talking to my a lot of friends and co-founders. Why do we judge? And people think, oh, it's a bad word, but our brains are designed to judge. Doesn't mean we're terrible people, right? When we drink something, I like this cup of coffee, or it's too hot, it's too cold, the room is bright. It's normal to judge. So stop judging ourselves for having a primary judgment in a sense. Kind of hard to do metaphysically, right? But if you notice your primary judgment, oh, I'm noticing it. Okay, compassion. The brain's gonna think. The brain wants to judge. The brain wants to have decisions. It's doing its thing, but I can aware of that process. I now have power to change my behavior output from it. And if we do this long enough, that primary thoughts will change, but that's not the goal right away. The goal is the behavior. That's what's in our control. What possibly is in our control, at least.
yeah. No, I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah. And I also think that this whole thing that happens where we're trying to do something different and our brain says, "Don't do that. That's dangerous. Don't you know?" I don't want, that inner critic that's like, "Stop, stay in your comfort zone." Well, they're there to protect you.
Hmm.
And I am finding that if I just acknowledge that and go, "I appreciate that. I do. Thank you." And then make a conscious decision, because sometimes they're right. Sometimes it's saying, "Don't do that." And you should go, "You're right. I should not do that." But other times when we're getting out of our comfort zones, I think it's important to say, "Okay, I hear you, but
Hmm.
I'm going to do it anyway." But that's just, that's awareness and acknowledgement and intentionality, instead of just responding to whatever stimuli is out there. So,
Yeah, so being where our brain can be so on autopilot, and people, talk about mindfulness before and how important it is. It's also want to tell everyone mindfulness takes a lot of energy. We would not survive if we were mindful 24/7. Just don't have enough energy in our body to run that script all the time.
right.
So even when we're not mindful, instead of judging ourselves for not being mindful, be like, no, 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 it's incompatible with energy expenditure to be mindful 24/7. Be like, okay, thank you, brain, for doing your thing of saving me energy with the time. And now I'm gonna take the autopilot off and do a little more here. Other reframe that's helped me out that you just made me think of, remind me too, was you mentioned learning what doesn't work. And so often we think of that, that's just failure, right? But if you're running experiments as a scientist, you're looking for data. You don't judge a negative result or positive result. Now, we know publications get published, they're positive versus negative. So the real world isn't as ideal as it should be when it has ever been. But if we can take that approach from Thomas Edison, someone asked him in an interview, he had the filament in the light bulb. I don't know if it was 1,000 or 10,000 times it took him to make the right one before it blew up so easily. And someone said, Mr. Edison, isn't it frustrated you failed 1,000 times, 10,000 times? And he goes, no, I didn't fail. I learned what didn't work. And that to me is my reframe. Like, when I was, starting a business tough, I'm like, okay, that summer I learned what didn't work. Right?
Expensive way to learn, but
Expensive way to
yeah,
learn,
yes,
but
that's true.
that's how you do the next step and see what is a problem solving step, right? It can be so hard when you don't have those successes. And so we need that reframe, be like, no, no, look at what I've learned so far, which will make the next time better. Or even if a client's work, and I'm curious, maybe your experience with some of your work with your coach and therapist, like they'll be struggling, 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 struggling. And then they'll have this amazing week and things will change. Like this week was so great. And I'm like, and I kind of step back, I think, I don't think it's only because of this week. It's because of those 8 weeks of the struggle that you're now seeing that seed start to sprout and break the surface a little bit. It's not just happened this week, it's all the failure.
We're so impatient, we're not much into building foundations, and we're not much into starting, at the very, very, very beginning. We're not really good at priming ourselves. We just want to get in there and change. We just want whatever the outcome is. That's what we want, and the faster we think, the better. And we all know that that's not true. It's a superficial, very non-permanent change.
Yeah.
And I think it can be incredibly misleading. So while I understand why people want to lose, 10 pounds a week, I get it. I wished I could too. But there was so much learning that happened and
Hmm.
figuring things out and learning about myself. I mean, that this whole journey that I've been on, and it really is not about the weight, even though that's the
Yeah.
easiest thing to talk about. It really was about figuring out who I am, what my purpose is, what
Mm.
is important to me, getting rid of all the noise, the expectations, the got, all the baggage. I use the example a lot about Michelangelo and the David, and they said, how did you come up with the David, because it's such an extraordinary sculptor? And he said, it's easy. I just took everything away that wasn't him.
Yeah.
And I love that analogy, because I think we take on, we accept, we let people pile things on, we pile things on, that's not even us, right? Their
Yeah.
expectations, our family's expectations, societal expectations, values that came from somebody else, and to the point where we don't even know what ours is. or what ours are. And that's why when I started working with a transformational coach, we started with looking at our core values. And I thought, well, I've never asked myself that question. And B, why are we starting there? And it
Mm,
became very clear why we start there. And I can promise you, as we really got to the uh, the nuts and bolts of what my values are, then I could start making informed decisions that aligned with those values. And I was so much less frustrated, so much less angry, and so much happier. And so, I am a firm believer. I've written it in my book. I say it every time I talk. We were not meant to go through life alone.
yeah,
None of us have all the answers about everything.
yeah.
I truly believe we need other people to help us, whether it's for a moment on a subway car, or if it's a lifetime of a best friend, or everything in between. We
Hmm.
need people to help get us to whatever the next place is. And that was never more true than when I started working with a coach and a therapist, because there were things I could not do. I could not get myself out of the deep grief of losing my brother, and I needed help. I couldn't have gone back and looked at whatever happened when I was a kid without somebody helping to facilitate that, because I was too in it. My head is a very scary place when left to its own devices. So
I
I
hear
need
you.
people to help me sort things out. I think everybody does.
Yeah, I was talking to a coach yesterday about this actually. She goes, "Oh well, yeah, I can use MI on myself, but it only goes so far." And I was like, "Can I add something there?" I was like, "Yeah, you and I might know what to do, but coaching is a personal relationship that works as two brains are connecting and are influencing each other." There's a big talk about AI and coaching this and this, and AI does amazing stuff for organization, structuring data, task management. There's a lot of cool things it can do. What it can't do that nothing can do is replace human connection, because human connection is irreplaceable. There are things that seem like it, but just very unique. And to your point, we are hardwired for human. We can put someone in an fMRI machine. And this is, if you don't look at the studies, I'll do a very interesting thought experiment. I say, imagine you're in a room by yourself. Someone walks in the room. Do you feel the same or do you feel differently? Different. It could
Immediately.
be someone you know and love, that best friend, someone you don't know and despise, and could be a stranger. It is different. We are hardwired for that, and there is this. Sometimes like, it can be so hard to ask for help too. From my position, it wasn't like an arrogant thing in medicine. Like, oh, I got. I was like, I didn't even think that's for help. I'm always helping others. Why? And I know what depression is. I know I'm depressed. Why would I? Or I know how to change. I know what to do. I need to lose weight. And then you don't reach out because somehow your knowledge of it is enough. It's like, no, no. The tool here, and I had some clients who were saying, well, I want to be really independent. I want to be like this, like lone wolf. And I'm like, who are some of your idols, right? This one client was saying, like, I don't know, I think he said like Jeff Bezos or something. I go, Jeff Bezos doesn't deliver the books himself, man. Without everyone who works underneath him, he would not be a trillionaire, whatever he is now, right? Like, even these people you idolize, who you think are these lone wolves, they have hundreds of people working for them.
Yeah.
So actually, we look at it, my mindset shift was, can we use our resources well? And our resources are humans. I don't mean we're using them. It's not in a bad way, right? We're using our environmental resources. We give back the way they give to us, right? Like it's a symbiotic relationship. And so to not use this really powerful tool because we think we can replace it with some checklist of how to be healthy or how to eat better. How many times have you been given on the printout of a doctor's office a healthy eating guide? When has that ever changed someone's point,
Never.
right?
Absolutely never. No.
Never. And to something you said earlier in the episode kind of may tie back to, you said you knew what to do. And I would say coaching, medicine might tell you what to do. Lose the weight, lower A1C, exercise. Coaching is the how and the why.
Yeah.
What's going to be your path, but more importantly, the why? What's your vision and values? And what you discover naturally, something I tell all my students. A fundamental is, how do you summarize well-being? It's too hard to summarize all of it, but one important concept is, the closer we can live in line to our vision and values, the more well-being we have. Your values are your natural motivators, your visions where you want to be. That's where you kind of want to be. Now, what's interesting in the work as a provider, as a coach, is that you realize what people's vision and values are could be wildly different, but we all have that and they're all motivating. A friend who of mine who's very competitive, I'm very collaborative. It both pushes us forward to do our work.
Right.
Right? We all have machinery in place. What's our fuel is going to be different, but we all have fuel, we all have exhaust.
Yeah.
And working with someone help you figure out your why, your how, and how that changes with time is where the magic is. Just because you know what to do doesn't mean you can do it you by yourself.
Oh, agreed. And knowledge on its own without any action is, I mean, how many health campaigns have we seen that, well, just say no to drugs? Oh, well, that was all it was to it.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
just eat less, move more. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah,
Right.
okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
The example I always give, especially people who don't work in healthcare or in behavior change, just it doesn't. It's not intuitive. Intuition is saying if I know more, understand more, it'll make change. And I thought that when I was going to med school, I was like, oh, if I can learn pathophysiology, fancy word for why things break down, I can explain to both the engineer who wants to know why cholesterol is bad about these molecules and blah, blah, blah. I can also talk to the illiterate farm worker in the jungle and why it's a tube that gets blocked. And I've done the range of it. Right. And I was like, oh, cool. I can really reach a wide audience with education. Yeah, I know that too. And I still went through drive through the other day. Right. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the example I also give is if you ever seen someone smoke a cigarette, no one's ever gone, oh, what? This is,
Oh,
I didn't, you're kidding. Emphysema? Cancer? No way. Right? And so knowledge is not the limiting factor in our well-being overall. I'm not saying that it sometimes isn't involved, but that's not the last limiting factor. It's the application of it, the implication. And if it were so easy, I think we wish our brain worked differently than it does. We wish it was like just put the input information in and it'll do the logical thing. That's not how it works. Let's actually adapt to how our brain actually works versus what we wish it could be.
agree, agree. And for me, I think we go after knowledge and do knowledge campaigns and awareness campaigns because it's easy.
Hmm.
We can all sit down and do that. We could all write one and throw it out there, but it doesn't really help a whole lot. Now, granted, we should be educated. Of course we should. But from a perspective of an obese or morbidly obese person, I could tell you pretty much what food has how many carbohydrates in it, right? I know all the fat content. I know what the serving sizes are. What I didn't know how to do is regulate it in practice
Hmm.
because other things got in the way. And I didn't know how to, for example, at a most basic level, I did not know how to prioritize my health. I did not know how to put me first
Mm.
because I'd been so used to serving so many other people because I wanted to be liked, because I was fat. I wanted to be liked. So those behaviors, you can't just get rid of those overnight, but you've got to acknowledge. And I know when I talk about those things, a lot of people get uncomfortable, but that is the reality. I did all sorts of things in my life that I did it because I wanted to be part of the group. They
Mhm.
were not healthy for me. If I had to do them over again, I wouldn't have done them. I put myself in situations that were probably not safe because my self esteem was not where it needed to be. I didn't love myself enough to say no. And now you want me to take this, whatever, this little algorithm of what to eat or this piece of paper and say, now you do that and ignore all the rest of the noise.
Yeah.
I can't. That's not how I've ever functioned. So I had to go back farther and figure out how in practice, what does it look like to put my health first? What does it look like in practice to treat myself with respect? What does it
Mm.
look like to put more energy into my own dreams than into other people's? What does that look like in practice? Because I had never done that. So at 58, 59, 60, I'm 62, I'm still learning. I'm having to rewire all of that because my default is I'm here to support you, your life, and your goals, not my own. And
Mm.
once I kind of made that shift, eating healthy was so much easier because it was natural.
Yeah. Gershon, I took a years ago a course. It was offered through Emory. It was a cognitive-based compassion training course, and it was meant for educators, first responders, right? And they had two different cohorts. But I was in the kind of teacher, first responder, healthcare worker kind of cohort, because they said that they split it up because people like in our category, we tend to have so much have a compassion for others versus self-compassion. Like we have so much compassion for the others. We actually have a strength of doing that. What the weakness we have is we never turn that compassion inward, or don't do it often enough. Or either, like you said, you and I, just lack of awareness. We're just so focused on the other, don't think about it, wanting to fit it. There's so many reasons for not asking for help. It's not only because you're insecure. There's a million reasons why this is there. It's even behaviorally enforced, right? You do a good job on a call, you save someone's life. Sure, you didn't sleep for 24 hours. You save someone's life. It's reinforced to not take care of yourself, take care of someone else. And and I see this with parents. Most of my work with parents is really, mom, dad, take care of yourself. That's how you're going to take care of your kids. And when you're a parent the first years of life, you are sleeping less because to feed your kids or doing whatever, but it's not sustainable. It's the whole idea of putting the mask on yourself first on the airplane, right? If you can have your oxygen supply, you can help save others. And for people, maybe you and I who are givers, that was been my first reframe. It's more of a roundabout trick because the real goal is to love myself for myself, regardless of anyone else. But if you need a little stepping stone in the meantime, one of mine was the best way to help others is help myself first, actually. And I can use my love for others to put effort into myself. It's not the ultimate long term goal, but it helps get the behavior there. And over time, like, yeah, maybe I am worth it, right? Maybe there's value in just take. Someone told me this: self care isn't selfish, and it can feel that way sometimes. We have to change that mindset if you're talking about self care isn't
Yeah.
selfish.
Yeah, you got to give yourself permission though to, I mean, I had to give myself permission to put myself first, and not like everything became about me,
Yeah, yeah,
but a healthy amount should be focused on me. And it just took me a long time to figure that out. And once I did, I figured out how to balance it. I help anybody, anytime, anywhere, but I also know when to stop
yeah,
and make sure I have enough left over to eat healthy and get sleep. And now I've started working with a trainer virtually, which is a big step for me. And man, it's making me really focus on some things I'm not used to focusing on, but I'm showing up every day and learning more tools to have a healthy life. And we know the benefits of exercise mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of let alone physically. And I after a month I can see a difference. Not
mm,
physically, not really, other than I'm sore, but it's mental. It
yeah,
is, I mean, I'm not even that sore because I don't push that hard, but it's mental, it's emotional. I'm walking taller. I'm
yeah,
carrying
yeah,
myself differently. I feel stronger mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and it takes all those different things to build strength.
yeah,
And so I've been really resilient and strong my whole life. I have survived a lot of stuff. There is no question about that. Some of it I did because I didn't know what else to do. Some of it was because I had so many people supporting me and helping carry me through these things. But ultimately, I am having to learn now, much later in life, to be very intentional about how I want to move through my life. And maybe this was when I was supposed to learn it. But I'll tell you, it's a freedom is still what that word is for me. It's
mm,
freedom. And it has opened up more things in my life, personally, professionally, everything. Because I went on a journey to figure out what was important to me, who I am, what I want, what I want to do, and how do I treat myself better, love myself more. And that's what I've done. That's what I'm doing. And I learn stuff every day.
self love. Because that's really kind of stand out to me right today. Is like me personally. Like self love is really, it's never enough of a reminder for that. And you know, I think again to demystify that, just because we help people in space, and we don't do this ourselves. Like my co-founder Miriam pointed out to me the other day, she's like, "Dude, you're doing it again. You're doing all this stuff and overworking and not asking for help." She goes, "I ask you how I can help, and you say nothing." And I'm like, "Thank you for pointing that out." I tell all my clients that when you say, "What can make it better?" your answer can be anything other than nothing.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It could, because again, a glass of water could make temporarily the system better. If you're more hydrated, you can think better. Like it sounds, people think that's so small, but I go, we're a complete system. We're often looking at the problem here, we can't find a solution. But if we can improve any other part of the system, it makes this machinery better. Right?
That's right.
So even again, doing all day long doesn't mean I don't need a good reminder from those around me and have the then thank them for that awareness that shine that back onto you. And then, like I said, make the behaviors um, to take action there. And I know we're almost out of time, but I do want to, one thing you said also too, Gretchen, that really I think from the client perspective was such a powerful thing. There's so much to talk about. I'm sure we'll have more of these conversations. But your diagnosis of type 2 diabetes said was kind of more impactful for you, kind of felt heavier than being 3 times diagnosed with cancer. And I think it's points out to what doctors might think is important or not important, and the client experience you never know. For you, we would talk about, oh, just tell parents it's this little thing, they'll get better. You don't know how this could affect them. And that we don't take that perspective into account. So thank you for bringing that up too, that like as provider, we never know how serious, not serious, impactful, not impactful something is. We cannot assume our lens is their lens and to really understand their perspective way more. That was really powerful. I wish we could, I mean, I don't know if anything you want to say about that question, but that really stood out to me, something I didn't touch back on that was kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I talk with my residents and the medical students about a lot. I'm like, you have to go into every situation. Hopefully, you know your patient a little bit, but you can't know unless you ask them about who they are, what how do they move through the world, and you've got to know a little bit about it. But just assume you don't have to be all gloom and doom about it, but just don't be callous and flippant about it. Telling somebody they have diabetes, might only be a blip for them. But for me, it gutted me. And I was lucky that the physician who told me that is the most caring, amazing physician I've ever worked with, ever. And he was so kind and so compassionate and so present that he didn't take for granted that it was no big deal. And that is a really important thing that healthcare providers have got to understand, that you're not giving yourself that diagnosis. You're giving it to someone else. Nobody responds to
Mm,
the world like you respond to things. You do the same thing. If, certain things will impact you more than other things, right? It may not affect me. I'd be like, oh, who cares? But for you, it could be ruining your plans for your retirement. I don't know,
yeah,
but
yeah,
we
yeah.
assume we know. And so we got to tread more carefully and more compassionately. Absolutely.
Careful, compassion, and love, both for ourselves and for others. I think that's kind of, I'm gonna let that sink in for us today here, Gretchen. So closing off here, again, I wish we had more time, but Gretchen, where can people find out more about you? Where can they buy your book? How can they connect you more to be in contact or learn more about the work you're doing?
Thanks. Well, first of all, I love talking with you, Diego. And yeah, we can go on for days, but this is so important. So thank you for what you bring to the discussion every single time. The genuineness is so appreciated. To find me, I'm kind of all over the place. I'm on LinkedIn. Just search for Gretchen Holmes, Holmes. I have my website, www.gretchenholmesphd.com. And you can find my book, The Work in Between, on barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com. Even better, go into your independent bookstore and ask them to order it. It's kind of everywhere. You can also find a link on my website. So I appreciate the
Buy direct
opportunity.
from Gretchen, I would say, if you can.
Absolutely.
Gretchen, thank you so much. Sorry to make you off. There's a little bit lag there. I didn't mean to cut you off there. But again, thank you so much for taking the time today. I think these conversations are so important for everyone, that well-being space to have, to keep in mind that perspective. So much more to uncover in the future. Thank you for being our guest. And for everyone listening, thank you for being a part of this episode. As a reminder to any coaches out there, or people who are thinking about getting into coaching, we do Vibly.io, Vibly.io is our platform. And I have a discount code that's good until tomorrow afternoon. Salinas20. It's my last name, Salinas 20. It's actually 20% off first 2 months of service. The whole goal of Vibe is to lower barriers everywhere. So how can we make it easier for clients and coaches? So that's our mission, to make things more accessible, lower friction points to make more connections. So any way we can help and serve coaches, clients, or those who want to help, please contact me. That's what we're here to do. Gretchen, thank you again so much. And thank you to our audience. And we'll see you all in 2 more weeks. Take care, everyone. Great. Stop recording there and stop on end stream.